Hi guys, how are you doing today? I am Constance and thank you very much for joining me in the next episode of my English class. In this episode we're going to be doing story time. Alright, story time, you know, our George and Venous story, and this story was created, or story time was created to give persons an idea of how to build a story, right? How to build a story, how to have the two different or three different characters intertwining, intermingling, changing, right? And until the end, or how these characters are going to end up. All right, so that is what will give you a good story. So it is designed to help students or anyone trying to build their story. All right, so we're at episode 19, and you can check out episode 18 to see where we have left off. And you want to see the whole story, you start from what? Episode 1, right? You will start from episode 1. All right. Venus and George's growing connection now in a concrete state. The two lovebirds didn't have to think twice about taking the next step in their relationship. The young millionaire Venus Thomas have repeatedly hinted around friends and family that George Greenback was the only man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Her numerous hints brought out the joy in George's soul and had him smiling continuously. George's only concerns were that he didn't have enough funds saved up to afford the lavish wedding he wanted to give to his soon-to-be bride, and didn't care for her or her father, Richard Thomas, footing the bills for this extravagant affair. Just looking at Venus, anyone could see dollar signs splattered all over her. So a cheap, shock-up wedding was totally out of the question. But George told himself 6 months after the opening and operation of Thomas Oil and Associates, he would have enough money saved up to cover this grand expense. Even with Venus pushing to pay for this elaborate affair time and time again, George put his foot down and strongly made it be known to her that this was not what he wanted. He wanted to at least pay for her wedding ring and some of the food which their guests would be consuming. Wanting for her man to be housed with the dignity he was requesting to have before expressing his nuptials, Venus decided to wait for another 6 months to seal the matrimonial deal with the love of her life, a poor barefooted boy from the village of Bussera, known as George Greenback. And like Superman with a cape and goggles on, George worked tirelessly at the Thomas Oil and Associates at the mechanic shop to have his vision become a reality. His very first paycheck from Thomas Oil and Associates, a hefty sum, went straight towards the down payment of Venus's wedding band. Now full plans for their wedding ceremony were being set in motion. Neither of the two wanted a church wedding, especially since they weren't affiliated with any specific religion. A garden wedding with a tent in case it rained and catering service to provide food and all other delicacies would be good enough for the young couple to enjoy their day of marriage. Many also, sorry, money was money also would be put aside for hotel accommodations, since George wanted the entire village to witness his achievement in love. George didn't have to look very far to find his best man nor groomsmen, since he already had 6 men from his village who were like brothers to him, working under his tutelage. Venus, on the other hand, had to go mending fences with her longtime friend Regina Brown and others whose lives she had disappeared from after making her first $1 million. However, who wouldn't want to be at the grandest of one of the richest girls in town as she stood in front of the very ambitious mechanic and loudly declared to him her I do's. After all, she was the girl many at her school and community envied, because she was a daughter to a very rich father and also an only child. Nonetheless, George was on top of his game at the mechanic shop and had invited Mr. Z-Man, his boss, and the other apprentice there to his upcoming wedding, which they were all very delighted about. It was a moment in which Mr. Z-Man had to stop with handling the greasy black tools, put them to the ground, and catch his breath for a moment. And with tears in his eyes, he pulled George into a passionate embrace and weepingly said, "I'm so very proud of you, my son. I'm so proud of you." Water trickling down his face, George, with stuffy nostril, uttered back, "I don't understand why the good Lord up above has lovingly blessed me so much." With another warm and comforting embrace, the professional mechanic whispered into George's ear, "You deserve it, my son. Your heart is pure and kind, and that's why you deserve all good things that comes your way." And with such affirmation, both men shook hands and returned to their duties. However, 3 months and business began booming at Thomas Oil and Associate. There were repeated customers, new ones, and the word was quickly spreading around that they were selling oil at a cheaper rate and that the quality was very good, which was the strategy of Richard Thomas. "Low price, quick sale," he said, especially since this company had just opened its doors for operation. Not to mention the impeccable job all men from George's village had been doing to bring about a smooth transaction in every situation at the Thomas Oil and Associate Company. The unity and camaraderie was wonderful to watch. Richard Thomas appreciated and generously compensated each of his employees for such, and even had Venus laughingly reminding her father of how much he initially wanted to annihilate his now golden goose from their family. Nonetheless, with a few paychecks under George's belt, he had paid off for Venus's ring and began looking for hotels to house the people from his village so they could have a comfortable accommodation when they arrived for his wedding ceremony in the month of June, which would be coming up in less than 90 days from now. But the hotel prices were too extravagant and for George's pocket, way too pricey. Therefore, he opted for renting a very large private house instead to shelter his family and friends from his village when they arrived at Nesbury Hill to witness him tying the knot with his darling girlfriend, Venus Thomas. A day they would all come to realize on June 7th. In a beautiful garden underneath a large white tent filled with love, laughter, and happy tears, as Venus Thomas and George Greenback exchanged their matrimonial vows and became husband and wife. Matrimonial vows which were followed by an after party, a grand reception where the crowd partake in dancing, eating, gave well-wishing speeches, and laid many gifts at the feet of the newlyweds. Many of the men from Bussorah, including the initial 6 who had come to Nesbury Hill to work with George, created a special dance for the newlywed couple, which they performed as a gift to the just married. A well choreographed and meticulous performance, which had George loudly exclaiming, "When and where on earth did you guys find the time to rehearse this number?" Laughingly, Bernard, the breeze here, laughingly, Bernard responded, "In the middle of the night when all creatures are gone sleeping and you, my dear brother, went off dreaming," causing the entire audience to outburst with a grand laugh at his response. And in the moment of jolliness, Bernard, Ziggy, Mark, Tad, Marcus, Lenny, and 2 other villagers enveloped themselves in a loving embrace, a group hug, which without words was conveying to each other that they would be brothers and friends for life, forever. This wonderful wedding ceremony marked a new chapter for Venus and George, one which they would be united in love and ready to face the challenges of life together, which George was extremely excited about. However, on the very first night of the newlyweds' honeymoon, Venus's phone began ringing repeatedly, which she refrained from answering, but George did, only to hear a male caller at the other end of the line venting about Venus leaving him in New York City to marry some damn village boy who couldn't even afford to buy her a damn candy if her mouth tasted bitter. At first, George kept quiet and listened to the venting caller, spewing out his profanities about him and his wife. He then decided to respond. That was true. That was very true, George said. At first, I couldn't even afford to buy her a damn candy. But now, since I can afford to buy her a wedding band, she is all legally mine now. She is all legally mine now. George continued with much enthusiasm in his voice before pressing click. Overhearing her husband's response to the caller, Venus cringed with fear, anticipating that George would be angry with her. But with a smile, he looked at his beautiful wife and joyously exclaimed, "We have overcome our first challenge, my darling. We have overcome our first challenge." Before granting her a loving embrace and a kiss to the cheek. Before granting her a loving embrace and a kiss to the cheek. So this is where episode 19 ends. I believe episode 19 will be the last, because could be the last, right, the last episode, right? But if you want this story to continue, please let me know, all right? But this is where I want to leave episode 19. Guys, I hope you enjoy this story. Please look for the literary devices in the story, the metaphors, right? And I would love for you to like, subscribe, share, and also hit the notification bell, so whenever I post a video, you will be the first to have it. Please check my description box below, and I hope you join me in my next class. Until then, bye-bye.